Chapter 280, Second Test. Chapter 280, Second Test. As soon as Chen Chitian finished speaking, an uproar occurred in the lobby. Nobody thought Chen Chitian would come here for the sake of Thousand Scars. Thousand Scars was currently ranked 41st in the selection. However, this result was one that she had gotten a few days ago. For a genius who had only entered the greater world recently, a few days was enough to achieve significant growth. When Thousand Scars had risen to the 41st rank, it had sparked a lot of discussion from the various participants of the selection. Many powers had also investigated Thousand Scars' background, and what they found had given them a shock. Thousand Scars was a genius nurtured internally by the Paimon Corporation. Not only that, but she was also young and beautiful like a goddess. Upon learning of Thousand Scars' situation, many talented young men in Star Lake City suddenly became her admirers. Meanwhile, by the looks of the current situation, Chen Chitian was also trying to woo Thousand Scars. I wonder if that guy will agree. Do you think he has a choice? Haha, I guess you're right. But he'll also receive second young Master Chen's good graces in the future. Nobody in the lobby looked at Shifeng enviously anymore when they heard Chen Chitian's words. Instead, they only looked at him in mockery. So what if Shifeng got to talk with Purple Jade? So what if Shifeng got to become an official participant in the Star Lake Legion? In the end, wasn't he still going to end up as someone's dog? While everyone was having hushed discussions among themselves, Shifeng suddenly laughed. Chen Chitian grew dissatisfied when he heard Shifeng laughing. What are you laughing for? Did you not hear what I said? As a genius who had only entered the greater world recently, Shifeng might have great potential and talent. However, in Chen Chitian's opinion, Shifeng was still nothing but an ant. He felt he was already generous with the conditions he had offered Shifeng. Why am I laughing? Shifeng chuckled as he looked at Chen Chitian. You want me to leave Zero Wing and ask for Thousand Scars' forgiveness? Aren't you thinking too highly of yourself? Chen Chitian immediately grew furious upon hearing Shifeng's words. So, are you going to reject my goodwill? I'm rejecting it now, Shifeng said as he looked at Chen Chitian nonchalantly. What can you do about it? As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, the entire lobby fell silent as the surrounding spectators looked at Shifeng in disbelief. Is he crazy? Shifeng's response was completely outside everyone's expectations. Nobody ever thought that a newbie to the greater world with no background whatsoever would dare to provoke Chen Chitian. The next moment, Chen Chitian's complexion could be seen turning livid. If not for the God's Domain Association prohibiting fights, everyone did not doubt that Chen Chitian would have his 4 bodyguards cripple Shifeng. Good. Very good. I'll remember your words. Chen Chitian said furiously. I hope you won't regret your words today. After saying so, Chen Chitian left the lobby with his 4 bodyguards. The instant he turned around, those who met his gaze felt a freezing chill crawling down their spines. This guy must be insane. That's the Dawnlight Corporation's Chen Chitian we are talking about. This guy shouldn't be thinking of leaving the God's Domain Association ever again. With this, it wouldn't matter even if he becomes an official participant in the Star Lake Legion in the future. Everyone could tell that Chen Chitian was serious about his threat. Meanwhile, the fissomeness of Chen Chitian wasn't something a newbie to the greater world like Shifeng would understand. One word from Chen Chitian was enough to turn Shifeng into a cripple. Shifeng might even disappear from Star Lake City entirely. Guild leader Shifeng, I'm afraid Chen Chitian won't let this matter rest, Purple Jade said, an ugly expression appearing on her face. She never thought that someone like Chen Chitian would become one of Thousand Scars' admirers. She also didn't think that Shifeng would provoke Chen Chitian to such an extent. The Dawnlight Corporation might not be a conglomerate, but it was still a corporation that had existed for well over a century. It was also one of the top 5 most influential corporations in Star Lake City, and it wasn't an existence that any individual person or hegemonic power could go up against. Even if Shifeng managed to become an official participant in the Star Lake Legion, Chen Chitian could abuse Chen Chilin's position in the Legion to forcibly strip away Shifeng's status. Meanwhile, so long as Shifeng lost his status as an official participant, it would become a child's play for Chen Chitian to banish him from Star Lake City and deal with him. I know. Shifeng nodded. Then, he nonchalantly said, "But it won't be so easy for him to deal with me. Not even the almighty apex powers and conglomerates could do anything against him in his previous life, let alone Chen Chitian and the Dawnlight Corporation behind him." Purple Jade was at a loss for words when she heard Shifeng's response. This was one of Star Lake City's top 5 corporations they were talking. They were more than capable of making even official participants of the Star Lake Legion disappear. There were even precedents of such situations happening. "You certainly are Zero Wing's acting guild leader Shifeng. You won't give in even when dealing with the Dawnlight Corporation." A clear and gentle voice suddenly came from nearby. When Purple Jade turned to this voice, she saw 2 women dressed in office wear approaching them. Upon seeing the woman walking in the lead, Purple Jade subconsciously gaped in shock. "What brings you here, Vice President Xia?" Purple Jade asked as she looked at the alluring and elegant woman before her in disbelief. In the past, Purple Jade never truly understood how powerful the mysterious Green God Corporation was. However, after entering the greater world, she came to understand just how powerful and high of a position the Green God Corporation held here. The greater world was a place that connected countless worlds. However, only an incredibly small number of worlds could give birth to a company that could be regarded as a corporation in the greater world. Meanwhile, every corporation in the greater world was an existence that even the various hegemonic powers of God's domain had to try and curry favor from. As for the vice president of a corporation, that was an existence that stood above even the guild leaders of the various hegemonic powers. "I originally came here to discuss a partnership with guild leader Shifeng," Xia Qingying said in response to Purple Jade's question. Then, she turned to Shifeng and smiled, "But I didn't think I would get to see such a scene. You have given me a real surprise. Are you disappointed, Vice President Xia?" Shifeng asked, smiling. No, Xia Qingying shook her head. "This situation has only furthered my resolve to partner with Zero Wing." "The Green God Corporation wants to partner with Zero Wing?" Purple Jade's eyes widened in shock, her mind thinking that Xia Qingying must be joking. After all, a corporation in the greater world was seeking to partner with a guild that wasn't even a hegemonic power in God's domain. This was unprecedented in the greater world. "I'm sure Zero Wing has already given you a reply, Vice President Xia. Between Zero Wing and the Flower of 7 Sins, you can only choose one of us," Shifeng said as she looked at Xia Qingying strangely. He had already made himself very clear to Lu when previously. "I understand." Xia Qingying nodded. "Which is why I am not here on behalf of the Green God Corporation but in my individual capacity instead. I wish to invest in Zero Wing and become a shareholder of Zero Wing. Although I cannot match the resources offered by the Green God Corporation's Grade 1 resource slot, I can offer Zero Wing resources greater than what is offered by the corporation's Grade 2 resource slot. For example, I can provide Zero Wing with some entry slots into the greater world and assistance in the miniature ancient world in the form of combat power and resources." "What does Zero Wing have to do in exchange?" Shifeng asked. Xia Qingying's offer was considerably tempting. It was especially true for the greater world's entry slots. Every additional person he could bring into the greater world would boost Zero Wing's combat power in the greater world significantly. "I don't want much, just 10% of Zero Wing's shares. I also need you to take care of some matters in the miniature ancient world for me," Xia Qingying said with a light smile. "That's not too much to ask, right?" After pondering for a moment, Shifeng asked, "Can you get me some entry slots into the greater world in the next few days?" "It will be difficult, but I can do it," Xia Qingying said after thinking over Shifeng's request. "However, I'm afraid it will only be a few slots." "Even a few are fine." Shifeng nodded. "In that case, I officially accept this partnership offer on behalf of Zero Wing. As for the contract, it should be fine if we sign it in God's domain, right?" "No problem," Xia Qingying answered without hesitation, seemingly having expected this arrangement already. This scene dumbfounded Purple Jade. She never thought that a big shot like Xia Qingying would hold Zero Wing in such high regard. For a moment, Purple Jade even had the urge to contact the secret pavilion and have the secret pavilion deepen its partnership with Zero Wing. Afterward, Shifeng and Xia Qingying discussed the finer details of the partnership. In addition to the Greater World's entry slots, Shifeng had also requested Xia Qingying to provide Zero Wing with a warship in Crying Sea City capable of carrying at least 100 players. In response, Xia Qingying agreed to lend Zero Wing a bronze warship that could accommodate up to 120 people without hesitation. From this generous gesture, one could see that the Green God Corporation's foundation was vastly superior to ordinary hegemonic powers. After their discussion ended, Shifeng entered the mental space and began his second test attempt. "Don't you think we are losing out too much in this partnership, Vice President Xia?" Lu Wen quietly asked Xia Qingying after seeing that Shifeng had already left. Zero Wing might have black flame, but Shifeng has offended Chen Qitian. "We'll have to pay a huge price if we want to protect Shifeng. We don't have to worry about that. So long as Shifeng enters the top 50, the Dawn Light Corporation will have difficulty removing him from the Star Lake Legion," Xia Qingying calmly said. "Shifeng got into the top 100 on his first attempt, so it is highly likely that he can get into the top 50 on his second attempt. So long as he enters the top 50, he'll catch the attention of the Star Lake Legion's commander. At that time, unless Chen Qilin can find a suitable reason, he will have no way of touching Shifeng." After thinking over Xia Qingying's words, Lu Wen nodded in agreement. The Star Lake Legion's newly promoted commander was no ordinary individual. The woman wasn't on the same side as Chen Qilin and the Dawn Light Corporation, either. If Shifeng could catch the new commander's attention, even Chen Qilin would be powerless to do anything against him. After Xia Qingying and Lu Wen waited in the test hall for some time, Shifeng's test result suddenly appeared on the scoreboard. Mental grade, 2-star mental strength master, potential rating, 97, mental strength rating, S, mental control rating, S. Overall ranking, 1. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 281, Unparalleled Potential. Chapter 281, Unparalleled Potential inside a certain training room in Star Lake City's God's Domain Association. The training room was the size of 4 basketball courts. Currently, a cold beauty wielding 2 daggers and wearing leather armor was dodging virtual arrows coming at her from all directions. While doing so, the woman also fought against 3 virtual monsters. However, whether it was the arrows or monsters, neither could land a hit on the woman. The woman also consistently landed attacks on the monsters, eventually shattering all 3 of them. "Your recent improvements are simply insane, Qian Hen. It's only been 3 days, yet you've already passed the association's advanced test. Even official participants of the Star Lake Legion would need close to a year of adaptation after joining the Legion to clear the advanced test. If those veteran official participants learn about your achievement, they'll definitely lose their minds," a young woman in her early 20s said in excitement and admiration as she looked at Shui Qianhen, also known as Thousand Scars. The God's Domain Association had prepared 4 different levels of tests targeted toward virtual combat in God's Domain: basic, intermediate, advanced, and special. However, unlike actual combat in God's Domain, the God's Domain Association's test required players to preserve their weapons and equipment using their mental strength. Essentially, this test tested players' mental strength and combat standards. Meanwhile, official participants of the Star Lake Legion would only gain the qualifications to participate in virtual competitions after they had conquered the association's advanced test. If an official participant managed to conquer the special test, they would become qualified to compete for a team leader position in the Legion. Qian Hen is the pride of our generation. It's normal for her to achieve such a result. Otherwise, the Dawn Light Corporation's second young master wouldn't be trying to woo her so desperately, a slightly older woman said enviously. "I heard young Master Chen is planning to get Shifeng to seek Qianhen's apology. Although Shifeng is a genius capable of entering the top 100, he'll probably have no choice but to capitulate in front of young Master Chen." The several other women training nearby nodded in agreement, their hearts similarly filled with envy. Only an existence like Chen Qitian would have the ability to get a genius of Shifeng's caliber to lower his head. Yet, such an existence had fallen head over heels for Thousand Scars. Whatever Chen Qitian does is his problem, Thousand Scars said indifferently as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. What Shifeng decides to do is also none of my business. In Thousand Scars' opinion, both Shifeng and Chen Qitian were nothing but minor characters. Ever since she came into contact with the Paimon Corporation, she understood that her stage was on a higher plane. As for Shifeng, someone who she used to think of as a threat, he was nothing more than an ordinary genius in her eyes now. Currently, she only had one goal: to get into the top 10 of the City Legion's selection. Shortly after Thousand Scars finished speaking, a young woman suddenly rushed into the room with an excited look. Something happened. Something big happened, the young woman shouted excitedly. What's gotten into you? What happened? The slightly older woman asked curiously. Did young Master Chen start to take action against Shifeng? No. The young woman fervently shook her head. Then, she hurriedly said, Shifeng. Shifeng is simply amazing. Not only did he come in first place on his second test attempt, but he even received an S rank for both evaluations. Everyone in the association is talking about him right now. The entire training room fell silent as soon as the young woman finished speaking, everyone looking at the young woman in disbelief. Impossible. Thousand Scars instinctively denied the young woman's words. Although Thousand Scars admitted that Shifeng had astonishing potential, it shouldn't be possible for him to go from 100th to 1st in the selection in only 2 weeks, much less receive a double S rank in his evaluations. This news sounded like a joke no matter how she wrapped her mind around it. It should be known that it had been well over a century since Star Lake City had seen someone receiving an S rank result for both the mental strength and mental control evaluations. How could a Tier 3 instructor from Zero Wing possibly accomplish this feat? At the same time, inside a high-class courtyard in Star Lake City, a middle-aged man nearing his 50s wearing knight armor and a 2-star mental strength Grandmaster's emblem on his chest stood quietly by a pool as he looked at a woman swimming in the pool. The woman in question not only had a stunningly beautiful appearance, but she also had a superb figure that could make countless young men lose their minds for her. However, when the middle-aged man looked at this peerless beauty, there was not the slightest hint of disrespect in his eyes. On the contrary, his eyes carried hints of fear. If Shifeng were here to see this, he would definitely be surprised. This was because this peerless beauty was none other than the female receptionist responsible for overseeing his test when he first entered Crying Lake City's Gods Domain Association. What brings you here, War Bear? The woman said after swimming to the pool's edge and glancing at the bulky middle-aged man. If it's not something interesting, you'd better be prepared. Commander Red Frost. This is definitely big news, the bulky man said somewhat fearfully. Just a short while ago, a newcomer named Shifeng took first place in the selection. Moreover, he received an S rank for both evaluations. However, I also heard that Chen Qitian, Chen Qilin's younger brother, seems to be in conflict with Shifeng. What is your opinion on this matter? Shifeng. Double S rank. The woman called Red Frost smiled. It seems things are finally going to become interesting in our legion. I heard that Chen Qilin loves his younger brother dearly. Once that newcomer officially joins the legion, I wonder what surprises he and Chen Qilin will bring me. Miniature ancient world, Crying Sea City's harbor. As the morning sun shined its rays on the harbor, the various powers teams gathered at the harbor and summoned their ships one after another, instantly causing the spacious harbor to become crowded. Among the many ships floating at the harbor, a 60-meter-long warship stood out like a sore thumb, the ship's majestic frame causing the surrounding players to drool. A warship was significantly bigger than the average ship. It was a tool specialized for combat out at sea. Even a common warship possessed firepower rivaling multiple advanced ships. In addition, it also had a defensive barrier that was far superior to that of advanced ships. It was a war machine capable of going up against mythic sea monsters. However, the warship parked at the harbor clearly wasn't just a common warship. After all, the warship's twofold mana barrier was not something one could find on any common warship. What is Vice President Xia thinking? Why did she have our Grey Goose team bring the corporation's sole bronze warship to assist Zero Wing? A level 124, Tier 3 male Guardian Knight complained as he looked at the surrounding players looking in his direction. However, he had long since gotten used to receiving such attention, So he turned to a level 124 female cleric with short hair and grinned, saying, "Feather, I heard from Xiao Xiao that Zero Wing's main force has not only her younger sister in it but also her junior sisters and brothers. I wonder if they'll be surprised if they see Xiao Xiao now?" In response, the cleric named Crow Feather chuckled and said, "Surprise will be an understatement. I bet they'll be utterly dumbfounded if they see how strong Xiao Xiao has become. Aside from Zero Wing's guild leader Black Flame, nobody else in Zero Wing will be a match for her." Before Wu Xiaoxiao joined the Green God Corporation, her combat standard was only at the Flowing Water realm. Now, though, not only was Wu Xiaoxiao only one step away from reaching the Domain realm, but she also had combat power rivaling Tier 4 players of the same level. This was thanks to the fragmented legendary staff and special class she acquired. Meanwhile, according to Wu Xiaoxiao, whether it was her juniors or her younger sister, all of them were only at the Refinement realm standard. There was simply no competition between them and Wu Xiaoxiao. While the Guardian Knight and Cleric from the Grey Goose team were talking, a commotion suddenly occurred at the harbor. At the same time, an indescribable sense of oppression spread across the entire harbor. When everyone turned to look at the origin of this oppressive feeling, they saw a team of 100 players clad in matching equipment. Even though all these 100 players did was walk on the street, everyone in the harbor could feel the air around them trembling. It felt as if 100 mythic monsters were currently walking in the harbor. When everyone saw the six-winged emblem these 100 players wore on their chests, the shock they experienced rose to a whole new level. Zero Wing? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 282, Tier 4 Team? Chapter 282, Tier 4 Team? Am I dreaming? Crow Feather, the cleric of the Grey Goose team, gaped in shock when she saw Zero Wing's team walking down the harbor and the surrounding players subconsciously stepping aside to make way for the team. Players on a busy street wouldn't make way for others out of politeness. There was only one reason these players would behave in such a way: fear. This was because every player in Zero Wing's 100-man team was not only of a higher race, but every one of them also radiated an aura comparable to mythic monsters of the same level. When the Guardian Knight from the Grey Goose team saw Zero Wing's team walking in their team's direction, he exclaimed, "Isn't Zero Wing's main force a little too strong? It's practically comparable to the various hegemonic powers' main force." "No." Colorful Lunarite, the Grey Goose team's leader, shook her head in response to the Guardian Knight's comment. Then, looking at Zero Wing's team solemnly, she said, "If we are talking purely in terms of equipment standards, even the various hegemonic powers' main forces are inferior to Zero Wing's main force. How is that possible, team leader?" The various hegemonic powers have fully equipped their main forces in 8-piece epic equipment sets. Zero Wing couldn't possibly have geared its main force members in fragmented legendary items, right? Crow Feather said in disbelief. Access to the miniature ancient world had only been opened not long ago, so 8-piece epic equipment sets were already considered the best equipment players could get their hands on. Even the various hegemonic powers had only managed to get their hands on a few fragmented legendary items so far. As for equipping an entire main force with fragmented legendary items, that was simply fantasy. Crow Feather had learned about Zero Wing's situation from Wu Xiaoxiao. Although Zero Wing had some powerful experts under its command, the guild was terribly undersupplied when it came to weapons and equipment. It probably couldn't even supply its main force members with 6-piece epic equipment sets like the various superpowers, let alone 8-piece epic equipment sets. They aren't equipped with fragmented legendary items. Looking at Crow Feather with a bitter smile, Colorful Lunarite said, "But they are equipped with immortal sets. 6-piece level 120 fine gold immortal sets at that. Fine gold immortal sets?" Crow Feather's skepticism increased when she heard Colorful Lunarite's words. "Are you trying to fool me, team leader? We are talking about immortal sets here. Even if it's only a 6-piece set at the fine gold rank, it is still an immortal set. Not even the greater god's domain's hegemonic powers will dare to do something as extravagant as fully equipping an entire main force in immortal set. A fine gold immortal set might not be as valuable as a fragmented legendary item, but it was definitely rarer than fragmented legendary items. As for a level 120 fine gold immortal set, it was superior to even level 120 epic equipment sets when it came to basic attributes. In the current miniature ancient world, Crowfeather doubted that any of the various hegemonic powers had even one of such immortal sets. Only a fool would believe that Zero Wing could take out 100 fine gold immortal set. You know I have the judgment eyes. There is no way I can be wrong in this, Colorful Lunarite said definitively to Crowfeather. In reality, Colorful Lunarite herself didn't wish to believe this outcome. However, the information obtained by Judgment Eyes could not be wrong. Of course, Colorful Lunarite could also understand Crowfeather's inability to believe her words. Hearing that an entire main force was fully equipped with fine gold immortal sets was equally as shocking as hearing that every member of a main force was equipped with a fragmented legendary weapon. After all, these were immortal sets they were talking about. Even upper-ranking hegemonic powers would cry tears of agony if they saw someone doing something as wasteful as equipping an entire 100-man team in immortal sets. Immortal equipment was different from epic equipment. A player geared in immortal equipment would not have to worry about engaging mythic monsters in a melee. It was especially true for MTS. They could keep fighting for long periods without having to return to a city to get their equipment repaired. Hence, whether a team possessed immortal equipment or not would affect its ability to grind and explore significantly. Guild leader Black Flame, as per our agreement, we will lend this bronze warship to you for the next 3 days. The Grey Goose team will also be assisting you throughout this period, Colorful Lunarite said after seeing Shifeng signing the God's Domain contract she had prepared. Once these 3 days are up, we will collect the warship immediately, so I hope you can understand. As for the Greater World's entry slots, Vice President Xia will have them ready in 3 days. However, exactly how many slots she can secure remains uncertain for now. 3 days. Shifeng nodded. Xia Qingying's capabilities were much greater than he expected. The world passage had yet to activate, so traveling between their homeworld and the Greater World was incredibly troublesome. Even a vice president of the Green God Corporation would have trouble acquiring entry slots into the Greater World. Originally, Shifeng thought Xia Qingying would need around a week to secure the entry slots. So, it was certainly a pleasant surprise to hear that she only needed 3 days. With this, the people he chose to bring to the Greater World would have more time to prepare for the Star Lake Legion's selection, which would, in turn, increase their chances of getting into the City Legion. If they could get into the City Legion, they would become a real help to him in the Greater World, and he would have a much easier time carrying out his plans. After Colorful Lunarite granted Shifeng temporary authority to control the bronze warship, Shifeng promptly set sail toward the destination he had decided on beforehand, the Bipolar Sea. The Bipolar Sea was a level 130 sea zone, and it contained the only Grade 1 or vein Shifeng had found using the 7 Luminaries Codex's elemental search. Grade 1 or veins produced large amounts of 7 Luminaries crystals, a highly demanded currency in the Greater World. 1 unit of 7 Luminaries crystal could go for 100 star coins in private transactions. One could say that 7 Luminaries crystals were the primary method for powers in God's domain to strengthen themselves in the Greater World. Even if Shifeng managed to join the Star Lake Legion as an official participant, he would only receive a monthly salary of 10,000 star coins. Aside from the monthly salary, the only other way he could earn star coins reliably as an official participant was to lease out land. Moreover, the precondition for that was to not get targeted by a corporation. Otherwise, nobody would want to rent his land, and he would have no choice but to get by with only his standard salary. Yet, if he relied only on his monthly salary, even staying in the God's Domain Association would become a problem. This was because the God's Domain Association's lower floors were in high demand but with low supply. Meanwhile, higher floors such as the 400th floor and above cost at least 2,000 star coins per day. If he were to rely only on his monthly salary, he'd be homeless before the week was even over, let alone purchase various potions to strengthen himself. Not to mention, his goal wasn't only to survive by himself in the Greater World. He also needed to nurture other people in the Greater World, which would cost a significant amount of star coins. Meanwhile, a Grade 1 or vein was something that could spark a fight between several dozen hegemonic powers in the Greater God's Domain. Even upper-ranking hegemonic powers would join in the fight if the vein wasn't located too far from their base of power. One could easily imagine how much wealth a Grade 1 ore vein contained if it could tempt so many hegemonic powers into action. Hence, Shifeng naturally couldn't let the Grade 1 ore vein he discovered go to waste. A warship was much faster compared to an ordinary ship. A bronze warship's speed was even comparable to a bronze mount's speed. Because of this, the journey that originally required 20 hours of sailing took less than 10 hours in the bronze warship. Moreover, traveling in a bronze warship was also much safer. Several times, they encountered some red players who tried to rob them. However, these red players would quickly steer clear out of their path when they saw the opponent they were going up against. As for the sea monsters they encountered, the bronze warship could shake off even mythic sea monsters with no trouble at all. The bipolar sea. When colorful Lunarite saw the tornadoes that covered the sea ahead of her, she couldn't help but turn toward Shifeng, who was steering the warship, and asked, "Guild leader Black Flame, this is a level 130 sea zone. Isn't it rash to enter this place with the team's current level?" In the miniature ancient world, the difficulty of sea monsters would increase by 1 rank for every 5 levels they were higher than players. For a team with an average level of under 125, fighting against level 130 plus sea monsters would be a great challenge. Not to mention, the bipolar sea was also regarded as a land of death in the current miniature ancient world. This was because the bipolar sea was not only covered in tornadoes and storms, but it was also filled with powerful sea monsters. Even the weakest sea monster here was a level 130 Grand Lord. Although colorful Lunarite didn't care about the survival of Zero Wings members, she would be in hot water if the bronze warship sank in the bipolar sea. Shifeng naturally understood colorful Lunarite's concerns. He also understood that colorful Lunarite retained central authority over the bronze warship, and she could retake control over the warship if necessary. So, he smiled and said, "This place might be a forbidden land for Tier 3 players, but what about Tier 4 players?" As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, Su Qianliu, who stood on the deck, pulled out a magic tactical vehicle from her epic spatial bag. Subsequently, a magic array covering a 500-yard radius slowly rose from the tactical vehicle and elevated the mana of everyone within its range by 1 rank. Tier 4 mana. Colorful Lunarite gasped when she felt the mana around her. TL notes: 1. Colorful Lunarite equals Lu Wen Xia Qingying's assistant. 2. The author forgot about the Dragonhorn tactical vehicle's parameters. Taken from Chapter 208, Hexagram Protection, erects a magic array that greatly strengthens the mana of up to 6 people within a 1,000-yard radius. Enhancement works up to the Tier 4 standard. Magic array costs 1,000 magic crystals per minute to maintain. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 283, God Mode Regional Dungeon. Chapter 283, God Mode Regional Dungeon. You can rest assured now, right, Team Leader Lunarite? Shifeng smiled when he saw colorful Lunarite's gaze fixed on the magic tactical vehicle. "I see why you aren't afraid of divine hunters and morning light now," colorful Lunarite said, realization dawning upon her as she swept her gaze across the Zero Wing members aboard the warship. Mana was the foundation of everything in God's domain. For players, the stronger their mana, the stronger their skills and spells would become. Apart from not having any Tier 4 skills and spells, the Zero Wing members present were no longer any different from actual Tier 4 players. Meanwhile, a force of 100 Tier 4 experts was not something any power in the current miniature ancient world could go up against. Yet, funnily enough, the various powers thought that Black Flame was Zero Wing's only Tier 4 expert. Should Crying Sea City's various powers try to take action against Zero Wing out in the fields, the outcome would definitely shake the entire miniature ancient world. Subsequently, Zero Wing's members could be seen effortlessly slaughtering the level 130 Grand Lord ranked sea monsters in the bipolar sea. Because of the difference in tiers, the level suppression effect was practically negligible. Moreover, Zero Wing's members didn't even require the assistance of the bronze warship's artillery. Just the silver combat techniques they used were enough to turn a Grand Lord into an abundant amount of EXP in only a few minutes. Wu Xiaoxiao tricked me. She said her little sister was only at the refinement realm, while her juniors hadn't even reached the refinement realm. So, what is up with all these silver combat techniques? Crowfeather's eyes twitched when she saw Wu Lingling and the others executing one silver combat technique after another, their skillfulness in using these combat techniques superior to even her. At a glance, their combat standards were not the slightest bit inferior to hers. Silver combat techniques. These weren't combat techniques that refinement realm experts could learn. Even most void realm experts would have difficulty learning one. Yet, Wu Lingling and the others had learned at least 3 silver combat techniques each, covering the 3 main categories of defensive combat techniques, offensive combat techniques, and footwork. Speaking purely in terms of combat power, Crowfeather doubted she could even match Wu Lingling and the others. These so-called juniors of Wu Xiaoxiao were already close to matching Colorful Lunarite, the Grey Goose team's team leader. Subsequently, the further Shifeng and the others progressed into the Bipolar Sea, the more Colorful Lunarite became tempted by the magic tactical vehicle. Guild leader Black Flame, may I know if Zero Wing has any intentions of selling this magic tactical vehicle? Colorful Lunarite asked. Zero Wing's main force members might have extraordinary strength, but the real reason they could have such strength was entirely because of the magic tactical vehicle. Otherwise, Zero Wing's main force could, at most, contend against the various hegemonic powers' main force. It absolutely couldn't achieve overwhelming victory, let alone fight against groups of Grand Lord-ranked sea monsters. Of course, we intend to sell it, Shifeng said as he turned to Colorful Lunarite with a smile. This will be one of the main products Zero Wing offers in the future. Zero Wing was incredibly poor right now. If there was an opportunity to make money, Shifeng naturally wouldn't let it get away. Not to mention, he had deliberately displayed the magic tactical vehicle to Colorful Lunarite this time. May I know the price? Colorful Lunarite asked, an excited look appearing on her face. Originally, she had only thought of trying her luck when she asked Shifeng about the sale of the magic tactical vehicle. Although she didn't think Zero Wing would sell such a powerful war weapon, it wouldn't hurt to ask. 1 bronze warship or 2 million star coins, Shifeng stated. This, Colorful Lunarite was rendered speechless by Shifeng's answer. I'm afraid I'll have to discuss this with Vice President Xia first. Trading a bronze warship for a magic tactical vehicle was out of the question. 2 million star coins wasn't a small sum, either. It was an amount of money that the average person in the greater world would never see in their lifetime. Even for Xia Qingying, this was a significant expenditure. So, Colorful Lunarite couldn't give Shifeng an answer on the spot. Shifeng wasn't surprised by this response. He, too, was aware that his asking price was very high. Afterward, he took a look at the coordinates shown by Elemental Search. We're finally here. Excitement appeared on Shifeng's face as he looked at the island ahead of him and verified that the Grade 1 ore vein was located on the island. However, when the bronze warship moved within 1,000 yards of the island, a gigantic magic array that covered a radius of several thousand yards suddenly appeared in the sky above them. The magic array was so massive that the people on board the bronze warship couldn't even see the entire magic array at a glance. After this magic array appeared in the sky, space underneath it began to grow chaotic. Spatial tiers appeared all over the place, and there was no place safe for the bronze warship. This is a regional event. Shifeng was incredibly familiar with this scene. Events would randomly appear across the entire God's domain. However, these events were normally caused by players. Meanwhile, whenever an event occurred, a special space would be created in the area where the event was triggered. An example of this special space would be regional dungeons. Regional system announcement: this area will be promoted into a God mode regional dungeon. All players are advised to be careful of the ensuing spatial turmoil. A God mode regional dungeon? Shifeng was stunned by the system announcement. Most regional dungeons could be categorized into 3 difficulties: normal mode, hard mode, and hell mode. However, there were 2 more levels of difficulty above this: Azura mode and God mode. Of the 2, God mode regional dungeons were known as lands of no return. They were forbidden lands for players under Tier 6. Even Tier 6 players would face a high risk of death in a God mode regional dungeon. Moreover, The death penalty inside a God Mod regional dungeon was incredibly severe, so much so that one would have to start a new account if one wasn't careful. Shifeng wasn't the only person stunned by this unexpected development. Everyone on the bronze warship was similarly dumbfounded. A God Mode regional dungeon. Regional dungeons of such difficulty were extremely rare, even on the main continent. Meanwhile, every one of these God Mode regional dungeons was the nightmare of the various powers. Aside from a select few super guilds, nobody else dared to enter God Mode regional dungeons. Yet, now, a God Mode regional dungeon had appeared right before their very eyes. Everyone, stick together in groups of 3 to 5. Nobody is allowed to move alone, Shifeng shouted when he saw the number of spatial tiers in the surrounding area increasing. Once the spatial turmoil ends, gather at the island's shore. Do not try to explore the island. Do not try to explore. The gigantic magic array had spread out with the island at its center. So, it was obvious that the event's starting point was at the heart of the island. This would also be the most dangerous location of the God Mode regional dungeon. Even if this was only a level 130 regional dungeon, a tier 6 God-ranked expert would still fall if they weren't careful at the regional dungeon's heart. However, before Shifeng could finish speaking, space around the warship shattered and transformed into numerous spatial tiers. Then, everyone on the warship was quickly sucked into these spatial tiers and disappeared from the sea. When the gigantic magic array in the sky disappeared sometime later, it was as if Shifeng and the others had never appeared in the area. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 284, Land of Ancient Dragons. Chapter 284, Land of Ancient Dragons. The sun was shining brightly on an island enveloped by a magic array. Shifeng stood up next to a creek, a sigh of relief coming out of his mouth when he saw his surroundings. Although the mana around him was incredibly chaotic and the gravity he experienced was several times greater than the outside world, he wasn't completely out of luck as he wasn't transported to the core area of the newly appeared God Mode regional dungeon. Different from Shifeng, colorful Lunarite's complexion paled when she recovered from her daze and looked at her surroundings. How is this possible? Colorful Lunarite's expression quickly turned solemn as she looked at the 30-meter-tall death dragons that roamed the area around her. Death Dragon, Spirit Devourer, Mythic, Level 132 HP 60 billion. Spirit Devourers might not be an apex race like dragons, but they were regarded as a Class 1 dangerous race in God's domain. Spirit Devourers did not have a fixed form. Their strength depended entirely on the creatures they've devoured. Spirit Devourers were also the enemy of all races in God's domain. So long as Spirit Devourers were discovered, every other race in God's domain would try to eradicate them at all costs. Even players were no exception. This situation was because of the Spirit Devourers' nature. Spirit Devourers could not only devour all life, but they could even devour the souls of players to grow and evolve. Meanwhile, the more souls they devoured, the greater their numbers would become. In the history of the greater world, many ancient kingdoms, ancient empires, and even apex races had suffered annihilation at the hands of Spirit Devourers. At one point, Spirit Devourers as a race had become so powerful that they had devoured all life and civilizations on numerous gods' domains. Back then, if it weren't for the greater gods' domain's apex powers joining hands and sacrificing over half of their forces to combat the fuller-grown Spirit Devourers, the situation in the greater gods' domain of today would definitely be different. As for the Spirit Devourers here, it went without saying that they had devoured dragons. Hence, they had transformed into death dragons. Although the Spirit Devourers here hadn't grown to maturity yet, their population had already reached a frightening number. If all of these Spirit Devourers managed to evolve into their matured state, the miniature ancient world and the surrounding gods' domains would most likely transform into lands of death. Aside from colorful Lunarite, Su Qianliu and the others, who were also teleported to this place, were similarly shocked by the scene in front of them. Although they didn't know what a Spirit Devourer was, the Death Dragon's 60 billion HP was more than enough to instill despair into them. Not to mention, there were well over 100 such death dragons roaming the area. There was no way current players of the miniature ancient world could survive in such a place. Is this what a God mode regional dungeon is like? When Su Qianliu looked at the death dragons around her, she finally understood why even Tier 6 God-ranked experts could potentially die inside the God mode regional dungeons on the main continent. The land of ancient dragons? After looking at the name of the land displayed on the system map, Shifeng said in the team chat, "We are moving locations. This isn't a place to rest." Normally, players should only consider entering a God mode regional dungeon after reaching Tier 5. It was especially so when said dungeon housed a dangerous species such as spirit devourers. Although the death dragons here weren't actual Tier 4 dragons, they were still invincible among Tier 4 opponents. A minimum of several tens of thousands of Tier 4 players would be required to fight against so many death dragons. Everyone nodded without hesitation. Then, they quietly followed Shifeng to the outer zone of the island. Fortunately, the death dragons weren't positioned close to each other. So long as they timed their advances right, they could pass these death dragons unnoticed. However, such a measured approach cost them a lot of time. Just getting to the land of ancient dragons' outer zone took them a day. Meanwhile, during this past day, Shifeng and the others learned how wealthy the land of dragons was. The incomparably precious 7 luminaries crystals could be seen covering the island's surface. The island's wealth exceeded the wealth of a grade 1 or vein by leaps and bounds. Although 7 luminaries crystals could be found in grade 1 or veins, they were only present underground in very small quantities. Even for Shifeng, this was the first time he had seen 7 luminaries crystals growing on the surface. After making a rough estimate, he concluded that the land of ancient dragons or vein could yield at least 3,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal per day. It should be known that all of the ore veins combined in an average elementary god's domain only produced around 6,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal per day. Yet, the land of ancient dragons vein could produce half of that amount daily. This was simply unheard of. If the miniature ancient world's various foreign powers were to learn about this, they would definitely send even more experts into the miniature ancient world. Even those upper-ranking hegemonic powers will lose their calm if they learn about such wealth. Colorful Lunarite inwardly sighed as she recalled all the 7 luminaries crystals she had come across thus far. Currently, the various hegemonic powers in the miniature ancient world were only playing around. None of them had seriously committed their strength to the miniature ancient world. However, it would be an entirely different story if half of an elementary god's domain's 7 luminaries crystal production capacity was involved. Even upper-ranking hegemonic powers would be tempted into action. 7 luminaries crystals were the capital for god's domain's powers to develop in the greater world. Unfortunately, it was incredibly difficult to monopolize an entire god's domain's resources. Even an elementary god's domain wasn't something an upper-ranking hegemonic power could occupy and monopolize. However, in the case of the miniature ancient world, a world that anyone could enter, occupying it would be a piece of cake. While colorful Lunarite was worrying about upper-ranking hegemonic powers entering the miniature ancient world in full force, the sound of an explosion suddenly came from a distance. Subsequently, the area 1,000 yards around the epicenter of the explosion sank by several dozen meters. Then, a majestic temple rose from the middle of this sunken ground. When Shifeng and the others turned to look at this temple, they saw several dozen figures charging toward this 1,000-meter-tall temple. The speed of these figures was beyond the speed of the average Tier 3 expert, so it was obvious that they weren't ordinary players. These figures also looked relatively young. Among them, 10 were even Tier 4 players. Even Crying Sea City's Divine Hunters Guild and Morning Light Guild combined couldn't come up with such a force. Are they the ones who triggered the event? Shifeng wondered. No God mode regional dungeon would appear without a cause. Typically, these causes were major events triggered by players. Moreover, to Shifeng's surprise, he found a familiar face when he looked at the figures approaching the temple's entrance, the Flower of Seven Sins Death Omen. At this time, Death Omen had not only reached Tier 4, but her combat standard had also improved significantly. Why are the Paimon conglomerates people here? Colorful Lunarite exclaimed when she looked at the several dozen people standing before the temple's entrance. They're from the Paimon conglomerate. Upon hearing Colorful Lunarite's words, Su Qianliu immediately began scrutinizing the youths in the distance. The Paimon conglomerate. So long as one bothered to learn from the various foreign gods' domains players, one would know just how high of a position the Greater World's corporations held in both the Greater World and the Greater God's domain. It was even more so for corporations that managed to get recognized as conglomerates. The influence and strength a conglomerate wielded was not something ordinary hegemonic powers could even begin to fathom. Conglomerates were so powerful that the miniature ancient world's various hegemonic powers had deemed it necessary to treat the flower of seven sins respectfully simply because Thousand Scars had joined the Paimon conglomerate. At the same time as Shifeng's group had noticed the Paimon conglomerate's youths, the Paimon conglomerate's youths also noticed Shifeng's group. How is he here? When Death Omen saw the cloaked and inconspicuous swordsman standing in the distance, an intense fighting spirit appeared in her eyes. He? Who's he? The crimson-haired young man carrying a broken sword and standing in the lead of the Paimon conglomerate's team asked as he looked at Death Omen in confusion. Death Omen was nothing special among their team in terms of individual strength. If not for her connection with Thousand Scars, she wouldn't have even qualified for the mission this time. However, from his interactions with Death Omen, he knew that Death Omen was an incredibly prideful. So, he found it surprising that Death Omen would show such a reaction to someone. He is Zero Wing's Black Flame. Death Omen answered. Upon hearing this, the crimson-haired youth couldn't help but turn to look at Shifeng. Black Flame? The god list's Azura Sword Emperor? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 285. This is Zero Wing? Chapter 285. This is Zero Wing? The god list's Azura Sword Emperor? A level 125 girl with short hair and golden pupils wearing silver holy armor muttered with a look of interest. That's quite a grand name. I wonder if we can achieve any improvements if we fight against him? It should be possible, the crimson-haired young man said in an uncertain tone. I gained a lot of inspiration from the last time I fought the third-ranked Holy Nine. Seeing as Black Flame is ranked 4th, he shouldn't be much worse than Holy Nine. Should we take action now? The short-haired girl with golden pupils asked excitedly as she grabbed the round shield and sharp axe she carried on her back. No, not today. The mission comes first, the crimson-haired young man said as he moved his gaze away from Shifeng and back to the temple before him. Moreover, he'll have to cross this hurdle first before he is qualified to fight me. I guess you're right. The short-haired girl nodded and returned her shield and weapon to their original position. This goes the same for you, Omen. Before the mission is completed, I will not permit any member of the team to do anything else, the crimson-haired young man said to Death Omen. Then, he smiled and continued, but don't worry. Once the mission is over, I'll have Zero Wing cease its actions against the Flower of Seven Sins. Death Omen did not say anything and simply watched in silence as the temple's stone doors slowly opened. However, she did not doubt the crimson-haired young man's words in the slightest. Whether it was the crimson-haired young man or the short-haired girl with golden pupils, both were bona fide monsters. Like Thousand Scars, the two were geniuses nurtured internally by the Paimon conglomerate. Only, they had joined the Paimon conglomerate a few years earlier than Thousand Scars. Because of this, they were strong enough to hold their ground against even Holy Nine, the third-ranked player on the God's Domain expert list. So long as the two youths wished for it, Zero Wing would have no choice but to comply with their demands. Moreover, it was just like the crimson-haired young man said. It was still uncertain whether Black Flame and his team could survive the upcoming battle. Let's quickly withdraw while they're not paying attention to us, guild leader Black Flame, colorful Lunarite said, cold sweat rolling down her forehead as she looked at the crimson-haired young man and short-haired girl with golden pupils. The Paimon conglomerate will always nurture some geniuses internally every year, and even the weakest of these experts would be a titled expert. 3 years ago, 2 little monsters even appeared among these geniuses. They are the Crimson Sword Emperor Meteor and Divine Shield Star Snail. Both of them had fought the god list's third-ranked Holy Nine previously. Although Holy Nine did not lose, he didn't win, either. If not for the Paimon conglomerate, the The two of them would have most likely entered the god list's top 5 already. Moreover, both of them are battle maniacs. If we end up fighting them, we will most likely be the ones to suffer. Colorful Lunarite didn't think Shifeng would lose to Meteor and Star Snail since Shifeng was similarly one of the top 5 experts on the God-ranked expert list. However, Shifeng could, at most, stop one of those two if it came down to a fight. I'm afraid that's not up to us to decide, Shifeng said as he looked at the threefold magic barrier that had suddenly formed around them. The magic barrier covered a radius of several hundred yards with the temple at the center, and it simply wasn't something Tier 4 players could break. Along with the threefold barrier's formation, the temple's doors also opened completely. Immediately afterward, an aura that caused everyone to tremble gushed out of the temple. A moment later, a one-horned humanoid with a pair of pitch-black wings slowly walked out of the temple. This winged humanoid was 5 meters tall and wielded a scepter in his right hand. When subjected to the humanoid's gaze, everyone present felt a chill crawling down their backs. A demon king? Colorful Lunarite gasped when he saw the winged humanoid. A demon king. Demon king was the Tier 5 class for demons. A demon king was a bona fide Tier 5 lifeform, and it simply wasn't an existence current players in the miniature ancient world could provoke. It was especially so when this demon king was in a god mode regional dungeon. In god mode regional dungeons, monsters would not be subjected to the system's restrictions. Hence, they could exhibit 100% of their strength. Moreover, the demon king that had just walked out of the temple wasn't an ordinary demon king but a demon monarch who stood at the top of the demon race instead. He was an existence capable of rivaling 6-winged valkyries of the same level. The next moment, a system notification entered everyone's ears. System, congratulations. You have triggered the legendary event Dragon Princess. Rewards unknown. Dragon Princess? Shifeng was stunned when he saw the system notification. At this point in time, the name of Dragon Princess was most likely foreign to most players in God's domain. However, during his previous life, the Dragon Princess was an existence known by all in the Greater God's domain. In a time when ancient gods had disappeared from the Greater God's domain, the Dragon Princess was known to be comparable to ancient gods. At the same time, she was also the ruler of the ancient Dragon Sanctuary, one of the Greater God's domain's 12 sanctuaries. It should be known that the Greater God's domain was a vast place that connected countless gods' domains. However, there were only 12 regions at the heart of the Greater God's domain, known as the 12 sanctuaries. The 12 sanctuaries were also the origin of the Greater God's domain. If a power wished to develop into an apex power in God's domain, the easiest, yet also the most difficult, way to do so would be to seize one of the 12 sanctuaries. In the Greater God's domain's long history, although 3 powers had only ever reached the apex by monopolizing one of the 12 sanctuaries, these 3 were also the strongest apex powers in the Greater God's domain. Yet, now, Shifeng was being told that the ruler of the ancient Dragon Sanctuary during his previous life was being sealed in the miniature ancient world. This was simply unbelievable. Before Shifeng could recover from his surprise, Meteor suddenly shouted, "Everyone, prepare for battle." As soon as Meteor finished speaking, the demon monarch Firenze could be seen lifting the scepter in his hand and creating several hundred summoning arrays in the sky. Then, level 130, Tier 4 great demons began emerging from these summoning arrays one after another, their numbers quickly reaching the 4 digits. After completing his summoning, Firenze sneered at Shifeng and the others as he commanded, "Go forth, my servant. Devour the souls of these heavens blessed." Immediately, the army of great demons swooped down from the sky, leaving Shifeng and the others no time to prepare at all. Tier 4s open a path. Everyone else, focus on support and defense. Meteor did not panic even when facing the army of great demons. Instead, he calmly gave out commands to his team. An army of over 1,000 level 130 great demons might be terrifying opponents to face for a Tier 3 team, but their team had 10 Tier 4 players. They were more than strong enough to cope against the great demons. The only problem they needed to worry about was their stamina consumption. "It seems there's no hope for Zero Wing this time," Star Snail said, sighing in disappointment when she saw the army of great demons swooping down from the sky. As for Death Omen, she simply let out a cold laugh in her heart. Even several Tier 4 experts working together would have a hard time going up against so many Tier 4 great demons simultaneously, let alone Zero Wings team, which only had one Tier 4 player. Hexagram protection. Accompanied by a calm voice, 4 powerful mana fluctuations suddenly spread across the battlefield, covering a 500-yard radius. These powerful mana fluctuations drastically improved the mana of the 22 Tier 3 players in Shifeng's team. Now, when it came to mana, Su Qianliu and the others were no different from Tier 4 players. Including Shifeng, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Shifeng's team was now composed of 23 Tier 4 players. TL notes, I guess the author hasn't completely forgotten about hexagram protection's parameters. Again, for reference, hexagram protection erects a magic array that greatly strengthens the mana of up to 6 people within a 1,000-yard radius. Enhancement works up to the Tier 4 standard. Magic array costs 1,000 magic crystals per minute to maintain. Yet, now, Shifeng was being told that the ruler of the ancient dragon sanctuary during his previous life was being sealed in the miniature ancient world. This was simply unbelievable. Before Shifeng could recover from his surprise, Meteor suddenly shouted, "Everyone, prepare for battle." As soon as Meteor finished speaking, the demon monarch Firenze could be seen lifting the scepter in his hand and creating several hundred summoning arrays in the sky. Then, level 130, Tier 4 great demons began emerging from these summoning arrays one after another, their numbers quickly reaching the 4 digits. After completing his summoning, Firenze sneered at Shifeng and the others as he commanded, "Go forth, my servant. Devour the souls of these heavens bless." Immediately, the army of great demons swooped down from the sky, leaving Shifeng and the others no time to prepare at all. Tier 4s open a path. Everyone else, focus on support and defense. Meteor did not panic even when facing the army of great demons. Instead, he calmly gave out commands to his team. An army of over 1,000 level 130 great demons might be terrifying opponents to face for a Tier 3 team, but their team had 10 Tier 4 players. They were more than strong enough to cope against the great demons. The only problem they needed to worry about was their stamina consumption. "It seems there's no hope for Zero Wing this time," Star Snail said, sighing in disappointment when she saw the army of great demons swooping down from the sky. As for Death Omen, she simply let out a cold laugh in her heart. Even several Tier 4 experts working together would have a hard time going up against so many Tier 4 great demons simultaneously, let alone Zero Wings team, which only had one Tier 4 player. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 286, Sword Emperor and Sword Emperor. Chapter 286, Sword Emperor and Sword Emperor. How is this possible? Death Omen's mouth nearly fell wide open when she saw the 22 Tier 3 players from Zero Wings team giving off an aura no different than that of Tier 4 players. It was incredibly challenging to increase the strength of one's mana in God's domain. Although some tools could accomplish this feat, the effects of these tools were limited. Moreover, most of them could only take effect on one player. Even so, these tools were still considered rare and precious treasures in God's domain, so much so that not even the Paimon conglomerate would be willing to provide such tools to its internal geniuses. As for tools capable of improving the mana of multiple players, it went without saying that the value of such tools would be exponentially greater. Yet, now, Zero Wing had taken out 4 of such tools. How could Death Omen not be in disbelief? At this moment, even the Paimon conglomerate's geniuses were stunned by this situation. Such wealth was something not even the Paimon conglomerate could take out in the miniature ancient world. Moreover, even if the Paimon conglomerate had such tools in the miniature ancient world, it wouldn't hand these tools over to developing geniuses like themselves. After all, such behavior was already beyond prodigal. It should be known that Zero Wing's magic tactical vehicles were not immortal items. The tactical vehicles would get damaged when attacked and become useless after their durability fell to 0. Meanwhile, monsters would typically prioritize attacking items capable of improving players' mana, such as the magic tactical vehicle. They wouldn't simply stand still and do nothing as the magic tactical vehicle was strengthening the players trying to kill them. Hence, taking out something as precious and fragile as the magic tactical vehicle in front of so many Tier 4 great demons was an incredibly crazy move. Guild leader Black Flame, isn't it a little too much to take out 4 magic tactical vehicles? Colorful Lunarite asked anxiously when she saw the nearby Tier 4 great demons turning their attention to the magic tactical vehicles. The great demons were not only numerous, but every one of them could also use Tier 4 spells. Even though their team had switched to focusing solely on defense, the magic tactical vehicle's durability was still decreasing steadily. Rather than risk losing 4 magic tactical vehicles, it'd be wiser to risk only 2 instead. After all, they should be able to keep themselves alive with just 12 players with Tier 4 mana. No, this number is just right, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Then, he turned to look at the Paimon Conglomerate's team, which was rapidly advancing toward the temple, and continued, any less, and we'll have trouble competing with the other side. If they were simply looking to stay alive, he naturally wouldn't take out 4 magic tactical vehicles and risk losing all of them. After all, he didn't have an unlimited supply of these powerful war weapons. He could only exchange a limited number of magic tactical vehicles each month. However, his current goal was to rescue the Dragon Princess. This meant that a clash with the Paimon Conglomerate's team would be inevitable. While it was true that their team had many players with Tier 4 mana, the combat standards of Su Qianliu and the others were significantly inferior to the Paimon Conglomerate's geniuses. The gap was so significant that Meteor and Star Snail could kill Su Qianliu and the others all by themselves. After all, fights between players differed from fights between players and monsters. Monsters possessed a significant HP advantage. Because of this, even the God-ranked expert list's top 5 experts would have great difficulty soloing a Tier 4 mythic monster of the same level. However, if these top 5 experts were to fight players of the same level and tier, they would only need a few moves to finish the fight. Not to mention, even with 23 Tier 4 combatants on their team, their speed of advance was only slightly faster than the Paimon Conglomerate's team, which had only 10 Tier 4 experts. Moreover, this was under the situation where the Paimon Conglomerate's team was still conserving its strength. Hence, the use of 4 magic tactical vehicles was absolutely necessary if they wanted to surpass the Paimon Conglomerate's team. Competing with the other side. Colorful Lunarite turned to look at the Demon King guarding the temple's entrance when she heard Shifeng's words, and she couldn't help but feel that Shifeng was joking with her. Unlike Nether King Diaklo, Demon King Ferenz wasn't a severely weakened Tier 5 monster. Instead, he was a Tier 5 Demon King capable of effortlessly annihilating Tier 4 teams. The reason the Paimon Conglomerate's team dared to come here must mean that they had come prepared. However, that was not the case at all for their team. They were dragged into this mess, so they didn't come prepared in the slightest. When Shifeng, Colorful Lunarite, and the others reached within 100 yards of the temple's entrance, the Paimon Conglomerate's Meteor and Star Snail suddenly activated their Tier 4 Berserk skills and charged for the temple's entrance at full speed. When Ferenz saw this, he swung his scepter left and right, instantly creating 2 Tier 5 magic arrays beneath his feet. Tier 5 spell, Spatial Smash. Tier 5 spell, Dark Paradise. Immediately, with Ferenz as the center, space within a 100-yard radius ruptured, and spatial tiers formed rapidly. At the same time, dark orbs capable of pulverizing space covered the ruptured space, the combination making it nigh impossible for anyone to reach the temple's entrance unharmed. Su Qianliu and the others were rendered speechless by this scene. The average Tier 5 monster was plenty terrifying already. Yet, on top of having Tier 5 basic attributes and Tier 5 spells, Ferenz also possessed control and mastery over spells that could put domain realm experts to shame. Tier 5 spells were incredibly complex, and even peak magical class experts could, at best, employ speed casting on Tier 5 spells. Silent casting was simply out of the question for peak experts, let alone double silent casting. Moreover, Ferenz perfectly combined the 2 spells into a Tier 5 combination spell. In terms of raw power, a Tier 5 combination spell was several times stronger than an ordinary Tier 5 spell. Even Tier 5 players wouldn't dare to try to receive such a spell. However, the Demon Monarch's Tier 5 combination spell did not faze Meteor and Star Snail in the slightest. Immediately, Star Snail transformed her shield into multiple magic barriers, drastically increasing her defensive capabilities. Then, with the help of these magic barriers, she briefly stopped the spatial tears spreading in her direction, opening a path for Meteor to advance through safely. As for Meteor, he transformed his broken sword into hundreds of threads. Then, he used these threads to guide the dark orbs floating in the air and have them float toward Firenze, his control over the flow of strength simply extraordinary. Under Meteor's manipulation, it looked as if he were the one who had cast Dark Paradise instead of Firenze. When Firenze saw this, he suddenly waved his scepter and transformed it into numerous lightning bolts that erratically spread to the surroundings. Not only did these lightning bolts break apart the approaching dark orbs, they also created a lightning field that prevented Meteor from moving within 50 yards of the temple's entrance. Absolute control? After trying and failing to deflect the oncoming lightning bolts a few times, Meteor's expression quickly turned grave. Absolute control could be regarded as an incredibly tricky mana manipulation technique to deal with. If a spellcaster knew absolute control, they could continue exerting control over their one-time use spells after launching them. They could even correct the trajectory of an offensive spell that had been deflected. While Meteor was trying to figure out how he could get past the several hundred lightning bolts and reach the temple's entrance without getting hit, a figure suddenly dashed past him and entered the lightning field. Is he crazy? Meteor grew confused when he saw Shifeng charging into the lightning field. Every one of the lightning bolts Firenze summoned carried power at the Tier 5 advanced standard. Even with a Berserk skill activated, a Tier 4 player could, at most, survive a few hits. In a situation where it was impossible to evade or deflect these lightning bolts, there was no way a Tier 4 player could get past this lightning field alive. Are you that eager to die? When Firenze saw Shifeng charging into his lightning field, he promptly had them attack him in an irregular pattern. Demon God's Armament. Godslayer. Shifeng executed Sword's Orbit without hesitation when he saw the several hundred oncoming lightning bolts. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 287, Dragon Princess. Chapter 287, Dragon Princess. Boom. 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 Several hundred light blue lightning bolts bombarded Shifeng continuously, the clash between stars and lightning bolts sending echoes of explosions spreading across the entire island. 98%. 96%. 94%. Because Firenze held absolute control over his spell, there was no use in trying to deflect or make use of his attacks. Shifeng could only block the attacks, and there were no opportunities to be seized. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng's HP had already fallen close to 50%. Yet, when all of the several hundred lightning bolts disappeared from the battlefield, Shifeng remained standing in mid-air. Although he had less than 5% of his HP remaining, there was no doubt he was still alive. He didn't die. Meteor subconsciously gaped in shock when he saw that Shifeng hadn't been reduced to ashes. Is he a monster? Firenze was not only a Tier 5 demon king, but he was also a demon monarch among the demon race. He was as strong as a six-winged Valkyrie of the same level and tier. In a situation where he had free reign over his Tier 5 spells, he could obliterate a medium-sized NPC city all by himself. Yet, Shifeng had survived one of Firenze's Tier 5 spells without dodging, deflecting, or manipulating. He had blocked and survived a Tier 5 Demon King's Tier 5 spell despite being only a Tier 4 player. If Meteor were to tell this matter to others, they would definitely call him a liar. After all, a Tier 5 Demon King's Tier 5 spell was not only powerful, but it also had a very high attack frequency and attack count. It wasn't something a Tier 4 player could resist simply by activating a Berserk skill. He survived even an attack like that. Could he be wielding a legendary weapon? Star Snail, who had caught up to Meteor, couldn't help but look at Shifeng in confusion. It wasn't impossible for Tier 4 players to hold their ground against Tier 5 monsters. However, players typically did so by deflecting monsters' attacks. If players were to go up against a Tier 5 monster with absolute control, they would need a legendary weapon to stand a chance. However, legendary weapons required a lot of time to obtain. It was why legendary weapons were considerably rare even in the greater god's domain. Seeing as the miniature ancient world had only opened up not long ago, there was no way anyone could have gotten their hands on a legendary weapon already. If Shifeng truly was in possession of a legendary weapon, neither she nor Meteor would be a match for him. Any fourth-floor expert wielding a legendary weapon could wipe the floor with them in their current state. Even as an MT, Star Snail doubted she could last more than 30 seconds against such an opponent. Not to mention, Shifeng was even an expert who had mastered a saint-rank mana technique. However, what Star Snail did not know was that Shifeng was in possession of the Tier 4 Overtier spell Demon God's Armament, the spell increasing the effects of all of his weapons and equipment by 100%. Not only did this spell boost his basic attributes drastically, but it also allowed his physique and reaction speed to undergo a qualitative transformation. Hence, he barely managed to keep up with Demon King Feren's attacks. Of course, out of the several hundred lightning bolts, only about 100 had managed to hit him. Otherwise, even with Demon God's Armament's buffs, he would still be blown into smithereens. Meanwhile, Death Omen fell silent when she saw this outcome from a distance. Originally, Death Omen thought that Shifeng would, at most, be a little stronger than Meteor. She thought that even if Shifeng could win against Meteor, it would be a close victory. Hence, she felt that if Meteor and Star Snail were to work together, there would be no way Zero Wings team could leave this island alive. But now, even if the rest of the Paimon conglomerate's Tier 4 experts worked together with Meteor and Star Snail, it was unlikely they'd have any hopes of winning against Shifeng. Is this guild leader Black Flame's true strength? Colorful Lunarite's eyes widened in disbelief at what she had just seen. At the same time, she also understood why Shifeng had reacted so calmly to seeing the Paimon conglomerate's Meteor and Star Snail. With Shifeng's presence, Zero Wing was practically guaranteed to secure Crying Sea City's medium shipyard now. While everyone was feeling shocked and surprised, Shifeng promptly charged into the temple as soon as he finished blocking Feren's lightning bolts. Although Ferenz tried to stop Shifeng, Shifeng was too fast, so Ferenz could only watch as Shifeng entered the temple. It really is the Dragon Princess. After entering the temple, Shifeng drank a master regeneration potion he took out from his bag while observing a woman suspended in the middle of the temple's hall. The woman wore a holy dress and a silver crown. Her face was as delicate as snow, and she was seemingly asleep as her eyes were tightly shut. Meanwhile, this holy woman was none other than the Dragon Princess Kelisha in Shifeng's memories. However, before Shifeng could further scrutinize the holy woman, the threefold barrier outside the temple suddenly shattered. At the same time, another threefold barrier formed at the temple's entrance, sealing the temple shut. At this time, Ferenz had also appeared inside the temple's hall. Calmly, he looked at Shifeng and said, "I have to say that you are very lucky to be able to reach this place, heavens blessed. I even had to retract all my strength just to deal with you. However, you are all out of luck now." As soon as Ferenz finished speaking, the density of the mana around him rapidly increased in density, doubling in the blink of an eye. The intensity of the aura he radiated was also vastly stronger than before. Guild leader Su Qianliu immediately grew worried when he saw Demon King Ferenz becoming even stronger than before. If the previous Ferenz was equated to a puppy, the current Ferenz was akin to an adult tiger in his prime. There was simply no comparison between the two. "The barrier is gone. All of you retreat immediately," Shifeng shouted through the team chat when he saw that Su Qianliu and the others intended to charge into the temple. "None of us will be leaving alive if you come in." Upon hearing Shifeng's words, Su Qianliu and the others gritted their teeth and reluctantly retreated from the temple. Despite their reluctance, Su Qianliu and the others understood that not even Tier 4 players could resist the current Ferenz, let alone Tier 3 players like themselves. If they stood before Ferenz, even moving their bodies would become a challenge, let alone fighting the Demon King. They would only drag down Shifeng if they chose to stay. Meteor was similarly surprised when he saw the change in Ferenz's strength. Without hesitation, he commanded, "Change of plans. Everyone, retreat immediately." After saying so, Meteor fled the area immediately, not daring to stay here even a moment longer. The violent mana Ferenz currently radiated could already affect his movements. He had never experienced this situation when facing other Tier 5 monsters. Ferenz paid no heed to the withdrawal of the teams of Zero Wing and the Paimon conglomerate. Instead, he looked at Shifeng with a friendly smile and said, "Now that your friends have left, I hope you do not disappoint me. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to use them to compensate for my disappointment. It's all or nothing." When Shifeng saw that Ferenz was about to make a move, he dashed up to Kalisha and cut apart the chains binding her hands. He prayed that this would awaken Kalisha. Otherwise, he really would be dying here today. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 288, End of the Line. Chapter 288 End of the Line. Land of Ancient Dragons, Outer Zones Shore. With this much distance between us, that Demon King will need some time to catch up to us. If we split up now, many of us should get out of here alive, Meteor said, sighing in relief as he looked back at the distant temple. Demon King Ferenz's sudden transformation was never mentioned in the information they collected, so they didn't have any countermeasures prepared. An increase to the density of one's mana could provide significant improvements even to ordinary players, let alone a monster capable of casting spells. If Ferenz were to use the Spatial Smash and Dark Paradise combination again, none of them would be able to move a muscle. "We might be safe now, but we have also failed our mission," Star Snail said worriedly. "After this failure, the conglomerate is unlikely to let us take on such an important mission again for the foreseeable future." The important mission she spoke of was crucial for the Paimon conglomerate's internal geniuses to improve their standings in the conglomerate. Meanwhile, they only had one opportunity to challenge these missions each month. Moreover, should they fail to complete an important mission, they would be prohibited from challenging another for several months. "It is indeed a huge loss for us. Meeting Zero Wing here is also outside of our expectations," Meteor said as he turned to look at Su Qianliu and the others, who were currently recuperating some distance away. Then, in a cold tone, he continued, "Zero Wing is much more dangerous than we initially thought. If we don't take care of Zero Wing now, it will become a hindrance for the conglomerate in the miniature ancient world." "I agree." Star Snail nodded. Moreover, they should have discovered the land of ancient dragons' 7 luminaries crystals. If they publicize this matter, it will increase the number of competitors we have to face. 7 luminaries crystals were incredibly precious even to the Paimon conglomerate. Meanwhile, an ore vein capable of producing up to 3,000 units of 7 luminaries crystal per day was incredibly rare and precious. Every god's domain was the basis of development for a civilization. Because of this, every god's domain would have a local system favoring native players heavily. If players were to enter a foreign god's domain, they would typically be subjected to the world's suppression and have their tiers reduced by 1. For example, should a Tier 6 player enter a foreign god's domain, they would be forcibly suppressed to Tier 5. In such a situation, there was no way these foreign Tier 6 players could go up against the native Tier 6 players. After all, the gap between Tier 5 and Tier 6 players was no longer one that could be overcome with numbers. Unless a power had overwhelming strength, it would have an incredibly difficult time occupying a foreign god's domain. Because of this, one could easily imagine how valuable the land of ancient dragons or vein was. So, to reduce the competition the Paimon conglomerate had to face later on, it was best if they got rid of Zero Wing's team right here and now. Coincidentally, there was an easy way to accomplish this in the land of ancient dragons, the Spirit Devourers. With the Spirit Devourers' help, they could permanently erase players from God's domain. "Should we attack them now?" Death Omen asked, a look of interest on her face. If they could deal a heavy blow to Zero Wing's main force now, Zero Wing would have its activities in the miniature ancient world severely restricted. On the other side, Su Qianliu and the others also quickly noticed what the Paimon conglomerate's team was planning. "They're coming closer. It seems they plan to attack us." Su Qianliu grew a little anxious when she saw Meteor and the others moving closer and closer to their team. After witnessing the strength Meteor and Star Snail displayed, Su Qianliu did not think even for a moment that Zero Wing's main force could win against the Paimon conglomerate's team. In fact, Meteor alone was probably enough to wipe the floor with Zero Wing's main force. "We are not far from the warship," Colorful Lunarite suddenly said. "So long as we can board the warship, we'll have a chance to shake them off our tails." "In that case, I'll stay behind and buy us time," Su Qianliu said. Despite what Colorful Lunarite said, Su Qianliu did not think their team was near the warship. Even though they had reached the shore already, they would still need to run for at least half an hour before they could reach and board the warship. This much time was more than enough for the Paimon conglomerate's experts to annihilate Zero Wing's main force. "You don't need to do that. We only need to fight as we retreat," Colorful Lunarite said, shaking her head. "Also, I'm afraid I am currently the only one in our team who can keep Meteor distracted. Only fourth-floor experts could keep someone like Meteor distracted. Anyone weaker would be dead in one move." Su Qianliu and the others might have learned many silver combat techniques, but their combat standards were significantly inferior to even the Green God Corporation's internal experts. They would only be throwing their lives away pointlessly if they tried to fight Meteor. Subsequently, Colorful Lunarite, Su Qianliu, and the others began frantically withdrawing in the bronze warship's direction. When Meteor saw Colorful Lunarite and the others running away, he laughed and said, "Do you honestly think you can help Zero Wing's members escape, Lunarite?" Meteor had interacted with Colorful Lunarite some years ago, so he knew she was an internal genius nurtured by the Green God Corporation. With her strength, Colorful Lunarite could indeed be regarded as a powerful expert among the various hegemonic powers. However, against him, she didn't even have a chance of running away with her life. Immediately, Meteor dashed forward, his body transforming into a streak of light that rapidly approached Zero Wing's main force. Although Su Qianliu and the others possessed basic attributes rivaling Tier 4 players, there was inherently a huge difference in movement speed between Tier 3 and Tier 4 players. This was because actual Tier 4 players could fly even without the help of a mana domain. Subsequently, the distance between Meteor and Zero Wing's main force rapidly shrunk. 1,500 yards. 1,000 yards. 500 yards. This is the end of the line. When Meteor saw that there were less than 200 yards between him and Zero Wing's main force, he promptly reached for his sword. At this distance, Zero Wing's main force was already within his attack range. Whoosh! However, just as Meteor was about to draw his sword, a sword light suddenly tore through space and flew at him from a distance. Fortunately, his instincts kicked in, and he dodged the unexpected attack in the nick of time. "Who is it? Who dares to interfere with the Paimon conglomerate's actions?" Meteor bellowed as he turned to look at where the sword light came from, his expression turning indescribably ugly. Previously, Meteor had only dodged the attack out of instinct, so he didn't find the attack to be anything remarkable. However, he quickly changed his mind when he saw the spatial tear that measured over 500 yards in length. No matter how he looked at it, this attack range was inhuman. "I have no idea what is going on since I was only passing by, but I cannot turn a blind eye to you chasing after Zero Wing's retreating members," said a peerless beauty with long light blue hair and a silver crown on her head as she stepped out of the spatial fissure. Then, looking at Meteor, the woman continued, "Since you intend to harm Zero Wing's members, how about I, Laura Crader, be your opponent? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 289, Another Monster. Chapter 289, Another Monster. "Commander Laura." Su Qianliu stopped running as she turned to look at the figure that had emerged from the dense forest and stood in Meteor's way, her eyes widening in shock. It had already been some time since Laura Crader had disappeared from the Azura Mercenary Alliance. Outsiders might not know what Laura Crader had left to do, but Su Qianliu knew that Laura had left to challenge her Tier 4 promotion. So, logically, Laura wouldn't appear in the land of ancient dragons. Is she the woman mentioned in the reports? When Colorful Lunarite saw Laura, she couldn't help but scrutinize the other party out of curiosity. According to the information the Green God Corporation gathered, Laura Crader was one of the few fourth-floor experts belonging to the Azura Mercenary Alliance. The corporation had even suspected that Laura might be a titled expert. However, Because Laura had suddenly disappeared after the Myriad Worlds Descent expansion pack took effect, the various powers gradually stopped paying attention to her. At this point, the name of Laura Crader was all but forgotten in the miniature ancient world. So, Colorful Lunarite didn't think that Laura Crader would appear in the land of ancient dragons of all places. Moreover, it was obvious that Laura was no longer the same as when she last fought in the Boundary Mountain range. The aura she exuded clearly indicated that she had already reached Tier 4 and become a bona fide Sword Emperor. However, after their brief surprise, a wave of unease also spread in the hearts of Su Qianliu and Colorful Lunarite. Tier 4 players might stand at the top of the current miniature ancient world, but one Tier 4 player was unlikely to be enough to stop the Paimon conglomerate's team. It was especially true for the likes of Meteor and Star Snail. The two were far stronger than the average titled expert. You want to be our opponent? Do you think you are worthy of that? Death Omen sneered contemptuously as she looked at Laura Crader. Then, she immediately poised herself to resume chasing Su Qianliu and the others. It was true that Laura Crader had shown incredible strength at the Boundary Mountain range. It was also true that she had reached Tier 4 already. With her achievements, even the various hegemonic powers would have to be wary of her. However, it was a different story for the Paimon conglomerate. The conglomerate's team of geniuses was vastly superior to the teams the various hegemonic powers could come up with. Not even the Godlist's top 5 experts would dare to act arrogantly in front of the conglomerate's genius team, let alone ordinary titled experts. Yet, the moment Death Omen took her first step, an arm suddenly appeared in her path, blocking her advance. Commander Meteor? Death Omen looked at the person blocking her path, her mind failing to understand what Meteor was trying to do. However, at the same time as Death Omen posed her question, she also noticed a strange situation. Whether it was the Crimson Sword Emperor Meteor or the Divine Shield Star Snail, neither wore their previous look of nonchalance. Instead, replacing their calm expression was a solemn one. Even their eyes carried strong hints of alertness. This was a reaction they would normally only make when they were going up against experts capable of threatening them. While watching Laura Crader slowly making her way over, Meteor said in a low tone, "Don't act rashly. This person isn't simple." Not simple? Death Omen was surprised. Could it be that even you are not confident in dealing with her, Commander Meteor? I can't be sure without fighting her, Meteor said. But I am certain she is not weaker than Black Flame. Not weaker than Black Flame? When Death Omen heard Meteor's evaluation, she couldn't help but take another look at Laura Crader, her mind in disbelief. Death Omen had already witnessed Black Flame's strength. He was a monster capable of surviving the full-powered attack of a Tier 5 Demon King despite being only a Tier 4 player. This was a feat not even Meteor and Star Snail could accomplish. Honestly, Death Omen already had a hard time accepting the fact that Zero Wing had such a monster in its midst. Yet, now, she was being told that the Azura Mercenary Alliance's Laura Crader was also a monster on Black Flame's standard. How could she possibly believe this? It should be known that the Azura Mercenary Alliance was only a group of nobodies gathered by Zero Wing. Its strength couldn't even compare to the local super guilds, let alone the Flower of Seven Sins. So, how could a monster of Black Flame's caliber possibly appear in the Mercenary Alliance? Amidst Death Omen's daze, Meteor began walking toward Laura Crader. Commander Laura, since you wish to intervene in Zero Wing's affairs, would you be willing to block 3 of my attacks? If you block all 3, my team will give up on targeting Zero Wing's team. However, if you can't, I hope you will stop interfering in this matter. What do you think? Meteor asked as he unsheathed the broken sword he carried on his back. Death Omen sighed in relief when she heard Meteor's words. The Flower of Seven Sins had no control over the Paimon conglomerate's actions. If Meteor did not wish to fight Laura Crader for the Flower of Seven Sins, there was nothing Death Omen could do about it. However, by the looks of things, it would seem that Meteor planned to try and fight Laura Crader. Meanwhile, should Laura Crader refuse Meteor's suggestion or fail to block Meteor's attacks, Zero Wing's main force would be doomed. Laura Crader was a little surprised by Meteor's suggestion. Then, she calmly responded, "All right, I agree with your conditions. If I can block 3 of your attacks, I will have to ask you to cease your actions against Zero Wing. Of course. I always keep my word. Meteor nodded and raised his broken sword with both hands. Immediately, the aura he radiated skyrocketed in intensity, his aura not at all inferior to when he had his berserk skill activated during his fight with Demon King Ferenz. It was obvious that he treated Laura Crader as a formidable enemy. They're having a one-on-one fight? Colorful Lunarite gaped in shock when she saw this development from a distance. She never thought Meteor would choose to fight Laura Crader in a one-on-one duel. The Paimon Conglomerate's team held a significant numbers advantage. Logically, even if Laura Crader was now a Tier 4 Sword Emperor, she could, at most, hold Meteor back by herself, while the Paimon Conglomerate's team's remaining 9 Tier 4 experts would have free reign. Meanwhile, these 9 Tier 4 experts would be more than enough to annihilate Zero Wing's team. So, there was no need for Meteor to go through the hassle of challenging Laura to a duel. The only reason Meteor would take such a course of action was that he felt that Laura Crader alone was strong enough to pose a significant threat to his team, and Colorful Lunarite found this situation to be absolutely astonishing. Before Colorful Lunarite could recover from her shock, Meteor's broken sword had transformed into hundreds of threads that attacked Laura Crader from various directions. Each of these threads carried enough power to tear apart space and heavily injure superior mythic monsters of the same level. Moreover, they could even increase their power by forming weaves of 10 threads or more. Tier 4 Advanced Silver Combination Combat Technique, 1000 Thread. How foolish of her to give Meteor time to execute 1000 Thread. When Death Omen saw Laura Crader patiently waiting for Meteor to attack her, she couldn't help but laugh in her mind. Anyone familiar with Meteor would know about his trademark move, 1000 Threads. It was an attack that combined the Tier 4 legacy skill Spatial Dicing and the advanced silver combat technique Tornado. It was with this move that Meteor had injured Saint 9, the third-ranked player on the God-ranked expert list. Had Saint 9 not activated an invulnerability skill in time, he would have definitely died to this move. The only flaw in this combination attack was its somewhat long execution time. However, so long as Meteor successfully executed the combination attack, his opponents would die without fail unless they possessed an invulnerability skill. Subsequently, the several hundred threads could be seen attacking Laura Crader from all directions. Yet, even as the threads closed on her, Laura did not make any movements. She didn't even draw the long sword hanging by her waist. Boom! The sound of a loud explosion shook the area, followed by a blinding light that brightly illuminated the entire coastline. The light was so dazzling that everyone found it difficult to look at the source directly. When the blinding light faded, Laura could be seen standing in her original position, her right hand sheathing the long sword she had drawn without anyone's notice. As for the threads that previously covered the sky, they had vanished as if they never existed. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 290, Legend. Chapter 290, Legend. How is this possible? When Death Omen saw Laura Crader remaining intact, she couldn't help but rub her eyes and take a second glance. Meteor's 1000 Threads was an attack that forced the third-ranked player on the God-ranked expert list to use an invulnerability skill. Yet, Laura had blocked it perfectly without using an invulnerability skill. On top of that, she didn't even manage to see when Laura had unsheathed her sword and brandished it. Standing in the distance, Colorful Lunarite also gaped in shock when she saw this outcome, her mind having difficulty accepting this situation. The average expert might not be aware of Meteor's trademark move, but as a genius nurtured internally by the Green God Corporation, Colorful Lunarite knew a little about it. Meanwhile, according to the corporation's report, so long as Meteor successfully executed 1000 Threads, even paragons like the third-ranked Saint 9 would have to do their best to avoid it. So, it was incredibly shocking to Colorful Lunarite to see Laura unscathed. Most importantly, she didn't even see what Laura had done just now. This situation caused Colorful Lunarite to turn to Su Qianliu, hoping that she could get an explanation from the other party. However, Su Qianliu was equally bewildered by this situation, so she could only respond to Colorful Lunarite's curious gaze with a bitter smile. Su Qianliu was aware that Laura Crader was very powerful. After all, the other party was the strongest expert in the stratified abyssal realm Slumber City. Only, Su Qianliu never thought that Laura Crader would be this strong. After silence enveloped the battlefield for a short moment, Meteor suddenly revealed a look of realization. Then, he asked, I truly did not think the miniature ancient world would have an expert like you. Players have only begun to reach Tier 4 recently. At this point in time, even titled experts have, at best, developed their mana bodies to a completion rate of around 110%, yet you have already reached the maximum of 120%. Who are you? Her mana body is at 120% completion rate. When Death Omen heard Meteor's words, she turned to look at Laura Crader as if she were looking at a monster. The mana body was a player's foundation. The greater the control a player had over their mana body, the greater the strength they could exhibit. Normally, a peak expert would be fortunate if they could unlock their mana body to 100% completion rate shortly after getting promoted to Tier 4. As for going beyond the 100% limit, to do so would require players to modify and improve the method they use to control their mana body, making their method better suit themselves. However, breaking the mana body's 100% limit was not an easy feat. Achieving further improvements after breaking the 100% limit was an even more challenging task. Typically, peak experts could, at most, develop the completion rate of their mana bodies to 105%. Moreover, reaching this completion rate required a lot of time and effort. As for fourth-floor experts, their progress would generally hit a wall after they reached 110%. Moreover, the higher the rank of a player's mana body, the more difficult it would be to improve. Even a peerless genius like Meteor had only reached 109% completion rate with his epic mana body. Although Meteor couldn't tell what rank Laura's mana body was at, it didn't matter, even if it was only a gold mana body. Reaching 120% completion rate in a gold mana body was still an incredible feat even in the greater god's domain. If Laura had an epic mana body, she would be a legend in the greater god's domain. After sheathing her long sword, Laura calmly replied, I am only an ordinary member of Azura passing by. An ordinary member of Azura? Death Omen couldn't help but cast a look of contempt at Laura. Only a fool would believe such word. We're leaving. After taking one last look at the so-called ordinary member of Azura, Meteor put away his broken sword, turned around, and left. Commander Meteor, are we going to retreat, just like that? Death Omen was stunned by Meteor's decision to retreat. This is the perfect opportunity to inflict heavy damage to Zero Wing's main force. If we miss this opportunity, Zero Wing will create many problems for us in the future. Death Omen admitted that Laura Crader was much stronger than she imagined. However, Meteor still had cards he hadn't used. So long as he used those hidden cards, defeating Laura Crader might not be out of the question. I cannot stop her in my current state, Meteor said as he glanced at Death Omen. If you wish to continue pursuing Zero Wing's main force, I won't stop you. However, I'm afraid you don't have much time left. After saying so, Meteor promptly left the area with the Paimon conglomerate's members. Damn it. When Death Omen saw Meteor and the others leaving, she gritted her teeth and retreated as well. Now that the Land of Ancient Dragons had transformed into a God-mode regional dungeon, not only did it house the incredibly dangerous spirit devourers, but it also housed an abundance of 7 luminaries crystals in its inner zone. Information on these 7 luminaries crystals would spread across the miniature ancient world sooner or later. At that time, thousands of powers would flock to this place. After all, nobody could resist the temptation of half an elementary god's domain's daily production volume of 7 luminaries crystals. So, they needed to start making preparations as soon as possible. Meanwhile, colorful Lunarite, Su Qianliu, and the others experienced another round of surprise when they saw Meteor's team retreating. Colorful Lunarite, in particular, had her evaluation of Zero Wing and the Azura Mercenary Alliance thoroughly renewed. After witnessing Shifeng's and Laura Crader's strength, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the Azura Mercenary Alliance had 2 experts capable of rivaling the God-ranked expert list's top 3 players. Not even the higher gods' domain's hegemonic powers possessed such strength in the miniature ancient world. This won't do. I have to inform Vice President Xia about this as soon as possible. Thinking up to this point, Colorful Lunarite quickly had one of her subordinates on board the warship go offline to inform Xia Qingying about today's matter. Meanwhile, inside the land of ancient dragon's temple, there is no escape for you, heavens blessed. Demon King Ferenz said gloatingly as he launched one Tier 5 spell after another at Shifeng. Even though Shifeng was fully focused on evasion and did not make any excess movements, his HP had still fallen to 10% in no time. He also didn't have any time to consume a regeneration potion, so it was only a matter of time before he got killed. This is my limit. Shifeng revealed a bitter smile when he saw that Godslayer's duration was about to end. Originally, Shifeng thought that he would have a chance of surviving if he broke the chains binding Dragon Princess Kalisha. Unfortunately, Kalisha remained asleep even after her restraints were broken. The only changes that took place after the chains broke were the temple's space becoming increasingly stable and the temple's mana becoming increasingly denser. Dense eternal energy had even started to flood the temple, allowing Shifeng's mind to achieve unprecedented clarity. With his clear state of mind, Shifeng was able to quickly break through the 100% threshold of his legendary mana body. Then, once he integrated Holy Annihilation's mana control technique with his legendary mana body's mana control technique, he instantly elevated his mana body to 110% completion rate. Because of this, his physique, the density of his mana, and the strength of his mana also experienced a qualitative transformation. Combined with Godslayer's effect, Shifeng was already close to rivaling a Tier 5 Sword Saint in strength. It was only with this enhanced strength that he had managed to dodge and survive the bombardment of Tier 5 spells from Ferenz. However, once Godslayer's duration ended, Shifeng would lose his only means of surviving Demon King Ferenz's attacks. Die. When Ferenz noticed that Shifeng had already lost his Tier 5 mana and Tier 5 concentration, he promptly raised his scepter and sent 3 Tier 5 destruction spells blasting at Shifeng from 3 different directions. Thump. However, before Ferenz's spells could hit Shifeng, a loud heartbeat suddenly echoed throughout the temple. Then, the entire temple fell silent, and the mana powering Ferenz's 3 destruction spells stagnated. At the same time, sweat began appearing on Ferenz's ferocious face as he anxiously turned his crimson eyes toward the origin of the heartbeat. Ferenz had gotten so anxious that he had even forgotten to maintain his spells, which, in turn, caused the 3 destruction spells to disintegrate. Immediately afterward, Shifeng also turned to the source of the heartbeat. At this time, Kalisha, the dragon princess who remained suspended in midair motionlessly this entire time, suddenly opened her eyes. When those indescribable silver eyes opened, both Shifeng and Ferenz subconsciously took a step back. They felt as if their lives were firmly held by this pair of eyes at this moment, and their life and death were no longer in their control. Meanwhile, the instant Kalisha awakened, a system notification also entered Shifeng's ears. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 291, Eternal Night Upgraded. Chapter 291, Eternal Night Upgraded System. Congratulations! You have awakened Dragon Princess Kalisha and triggered the legendary world quest Sanctuary's Rise. Quest content: collect 100 God Crystals within 100 days to restore Dragon Princess Kalisha's strength. Rewards unknown. The system notification repeated 3 times, putting Shifeng into a daze. 100 God Crystals in 100 days. Shifeng couldn't help but doubt his eyes when he read the system notification before him. A God Crystal was the crystallization of a god's power. While it might not be as rare as a legendary item, its preciousness was not the least beast lower than fragmented legendary items. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that 100 God Crystals could be used to exchange 100 fragmented legendary items. Moreover, this was only true when one was offering to use God Crystals to trade for fragmented legendary items. If one was trying to trade fragmented legendary items for God Crystals, the ratio wouldn't necessarily be 1-to-1. Even if all of the hegemonic powers in the miniature ancient world worked together, they wouldn't necessarily be able to come up with 50 god crystals in 100 days, let alone 100 god crystals. This was essentially an impossible quest. While Shifeng was in a daze, Ferenz suddenly regained his calm, his previous frightened expression nowhere to be seen. There was even a hint of joy in his eyes now. It seems the passage of time has weakened you quite a bit, Kalisha. You're not even at tier 5 right now, Ferenz said as he looked at Kalisha with a cordial smile. In that case, you might as well let me see you off one last time. It won't be a disgrace for you to die by my hands. After saying so, Ferenz promptly began chanting a spell. Subsequently, with each syllable Ferenz spat out, the lighting in the temple gradually darkened. At the same time, dark mana began flooding the temple and expelling all other elements of mana from the temple. Shifeng's expression turned grave when he saw this scene. Shifeng was well aware that Ferenz had not gotten serious in the slightest when fighting him previously. The Demon King was only messing around and using a bunch of ordinary tier 5 spells against him. Now, though, Ferenz was serious. Dark Tide. This was a tier 5 curse capable of rivaling tier 6 spells. This one spell could eradicate all life within a royal capital with a population of tens of millions. It was a spell that could neither be blocked nor dodged. If Ferenz was allowed to complete this spell, Shifeng would no longer have to worry about completing his legendary world quest. After all, nothing would be left of his character's tier 4 immortal soul if he got hit by this move. His character would cease to exist in God's domain, and he would have no choice but to start over from scratch. As the density of the dark mana in the temple continuously increased, Kalisha suddenly appeared in front of Shifeng. Is she really only at tier 4? Shifeng was startled when he saw Kalisha appearing before him all of a sudden. Even though Kalisha's statistics showed that she was only at level 130, tier 4 currently, she was so fast that he didn't even react to her movements. Normally, not even a tier 5 existence's movement speed was fast enough to escape Shifeng's perception. The only explanation he could think of was that Kalisha had executed spatial leap. This was a movement method that was superior to even spatial movement. Normally, only tier 6 gods could use this movement method. Do you wish to live, heavens blessed? Kalisha asked as she looked at Shifeng. Naturally. Shifeng nodded. Good. Sign a soul contract with me, then, Kalisha said. I will lend you my power. Afterward, you will have to figure out a way to distract Ferenz for 1 minute. A soul contract. Shifeng frowned. A soul contract was not a normal contract. It was the main method evil gods and demon gods used to recruit followers. Players who signed a soul contract would have to permanently contribute a portion of their soul to the contractor to gain a portion of the contractor's power. In the greater god's domain, many players lacking strength would often go down this path to achieve further growth. However, this external power could only provide players with a considerably limited boost in strength. Normally, it would be no different than receiving a god's blessing. At most, the recipient would see an increase in their physique and basic attributes. Moreover, these bonuses would become negligible once players reached tier 6. While receiving a small boost in strength was better than nothing, the price of obtaining this strength was massive. Firstly, players would permanently lose a portion of their souls. Not only would this increase the death penalty they suffered by several times, but it would also increase the amount of EXP they needed to level up by 2 or more times. Secondly, and most importantly, when the contractor of a soul contract died, the contractee would also follow them to the grave. Of course, a soul contract wasn't completely without its benefits. The stronger a contractor was, the greater the power players would gain when they were at a low tier. This was also why many players would willingly strive for the various evil gods and demon gods. Of course, you can also choose not to enter a contract with me, Kalisha added as she looked at Shifeng, her bright lips curving into a playful smile. But in that case, you'll be dying here with me. I can see that you carry a not-so-small secret on you. Are you really willing to start over? Fine. You win, Shifeng said begrudgingly. He couldn't help but feel that the main god system was messing with him. However, the ancient abyssal god's legacy was not some bargain bin legacy. If he were to lose it, no amount of regret could make up for it. That's more like it. Let's begin immediately, then. Kalisha smiled and nodded. Then, seeing as Ferenz was about to complete his spell, she quickly drew an ancient divine pattern on the back of Shifeng's right hand. My power is a little special. It cannot enhance your body directly, only your weapon. Fortunately, it seems that you are carrying a good weapon with you. As soon as Kalisha finished speaking, a new notification appeared before Shifeng. System, you have signed a soul contract with Dragon Princess Kalisha. You have obtained the Ancient Dragon's power. When Ancient Dragon's power is activated, you may choose to upgrade the rank of one weapon temporarily. As Dragon Princess Kalisha is currently at Tier 4, the chosen weapon can only be upgraded up to the legendary rank for 10 minutes. The first use of Ancient Dragon's power will not cost anything. Each subsequent use will cost 1 God Crystal. What an unbelievable power! Shifeng was stunned by the information the system notification conveyed. Although he had long since expected Dragon Princess Kalisha's power to be extraordinary, he didn't think it would be this amazing. However, after seeing what the Dragon Princess's power could offer, Shifeng understood why Kalisha could become the Ancient Dragon Sanctuary's sole ruler and elevate an upper-ranking hegemonic power into an apex power during his previous life. Even though Kalisha was only at Tier 4 right now, the power she granted him could already upgrade a weapon up to the legendary rank. If Kalisha were to ascend to Tier 5 or Tier 6, the Ancient Dragon's power she granted him would naturally receive an improvement as well. At that time, he might even be able to elevate a weapon into a divine artifact. A divine artifact. This was a weapon countless experts dreamed of obtaining. Just one piece of divine equipment was enough to let a Tier 6 God-ranked expert rival ancient gods. If a Tier 6 God-ranked expert were to wield a divine weapon, they would see an even greater increase in their strength. However, the cost of using Ancient Dragon's power was also astonishingly high. Even in its current state, Ancient Dragon's power already cost 1 God Crystal per use. That was equivalent to expending 1 fragmented legendary item for 10 minutes of glory. Even hegemonic powers would wince at this price. However, before Shifeng could recover from his surprise, Ferenz finally finished chanting the last syllable of his incantation. Die! Ferenz bellowed as he released his dark tide at Shifeng and Kalisha. Immediately, light within the temple seemingly vanished as a tidal wave of darkness appeared and threatened to devour everything within the temple. Ancient Dragon's power. Shifeng dared not hold back in this critical moment. Immediately, he used Ancient Dragon's power on the Winter of Eternal Night and swung the long sword at the oncoming tidal wave. Radiant Night. TL notes, I will be using divine weapons and divine equipment to refer to divine artifact-ranked weapons and equipment. I will still use divine artifact-ranked weapons and equipment when the context isn't clear enough. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 292, Peak State. Chapter 292, Peak State. When Shifeng swung the Winter of Eternal Night, the surging tide of darkness instantly froze. Even space itself had become frozen, and not a single particle of mana could move in the slightest, all of them suspended in place. Amazing. After looking at the frozen space around him and the Winter of Eternal Night in his hand, Shifeng couldn't help but be shocked. Although legendary weapons had the power to allow players to transcend tiers, he didn't think he could achieve such an effect with the Winter of Eternal Night. Even mana was prevented from carrying out their most basic operations. This frightening passive ability was definitely enough to put the Winter of Eternal Night into the ranks of the 10 great legendary weapons. It could be said that spells would become nothing but a joke in front of the Winter of Eternal Night. Spells relied on the movement of mana to exist. If even mana was prohibited from moving, it would naturally become impossible for a spellcaster to maintain the integrity of their spells. Meanwhile, Demon King Ferenz was also stunned by Shifeng's Radiant Night. Dark Tide was Ferenz's strongest spell. This one spell was more than enough for him to heavily damage opponents of the same tier. Yet, Shifeng had neutralized it so easily. However, Ferenz was a Tier 5 Demon King. Moreover, he was even a demon monarch among demons. Even though this unexpected development had shocked him, he quickly recovered his calm and transformed his scepter into an axe. Then, he appeared before Shifeng via spatial movement and swung his 5-meter-long axe down at Shifeng. Ferenz did not complement his attack with any techniques. Even so, his attack carried overwhelming speed and power, enough for him to obliterate an entire city. Bang! Countless sparks appeared when Shifeng's longsword collided with Ferenz's axe. At the same time, Ferenz's axe was knocked away, indicating that the longsword carried more power than the axe. This one exchange instantly showed who was superior when it came to strength. However, Ferenz remained unfazed even after seeing the disparity in strength. A cold smile had even appeared on his face. "So what if you can block my attack?" A calm and contemptuous voice flowed out of Ferenz's mouth. At the same time, another Ferenz had suddenly appeared behind Kalisha, the axe in his hands already descending toward the dragon princess, who appeared to be chanting something with her eyes closed. Tier 5 spell, Worldly Doppelganger. It was a spell that allowed the user to create a carbon copy of themselves. The doppelganger created would have 100% of the user's basic attributes and all of the user's skills and spells. However, Shifeng did not panic in this situation. Instead, he simply smiled as he swung the winter of eternal night. Sword's orbit. Suddenly, a river of stars that covered a 500-yard radius suddenly formed with Shifeng as the center. At a glance, it looked as if a miniature galaxy had formed within the temple. Meanwhile, before Ferenz's doppelganger could hit Kalisha with its axe, it was sent flying and crashing into a wall by one of the many stars flowing around Shifeng. Ferenz's doppelganger wasn't the only one sent flying. Even the real Ferenz standing before Shifeng had similarly been sent flying into a wall, his HP instantly falling by over 100 million. For a time, both demon kings couldn't help but look at Shifeng with a bewildered look, their minds failing to understand what Shifeng had just done. "It's been a while since I've felt so liberated. As expected of the ancient god of thunder's final creation, I didn't think it could let me use Sword's orbit in its peak state." Satisfaction filled Shifeng as he looked at the winter of eternal night. At the same time, he couldn't help but start to pity Ferenz. Sword's orbit was the technique he had relied on to rise to prominence. Initially, Sword's orbit was nothing more than an ordinary combat technique. However, as time passed and he continued perfecting the technique, Sword's orbit had also continuously grown stronger with him. Because of this, if he wanted to unleash Sword's orbit's full potential, he would have to reach the Tier 5 standard at the very least. Just having Tier 5 mana and concentration wouldn't be enough. His physique would also have to reach Tier 5. Only after meeting these three conditions could he perfectly integrate world creation with Sword's orbit and unleash power rivaling the second sword, Holy Devour. In addition, everything within a 500-yard radius would be within his attack range, and he would no longer have to worry about concentration expenditure. Subsequently, Ferenz and his doppelganger could be seen attacking Kalisha one time after another. However, no matter what attack they used, they couldn't even get close to Kalisha, let alone injure her. Shifeng had stopped all of their attacks without fail. Unfortunately, even though Shifeng was suppressing Ferenz, there was nothing he could do to really threaten the Demon King. Search hosted novel for the original. As a level 130, Tier 5 Demon King, Ferenz's base HP was over 300 billion. His battle recovery as a demon monarch even allowed him to recover 4% of his HP every 5 seconds. He simply wasn't an existence that could be killed by a Tier 4 player wielding a legendary weapon. Fortunately, Shifeng's job wasn't to kill Ferenz. All he needed to do was keep the Demon King busy for 1 minute. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 40 seconds. Time quickly passed by in the temple. After Shifeng held on for 1 full minute, Kalisha suddenly opened her eyes. Immediately afterward, the expressions of both Ferenzes twisted, and the life in their eyes rapidly disappeared. When Ferenz finally died, Kalisha's expression had also become deathly pale, sweat rolling down her forehead. It was obvious that killing Ferenz had put a huge toll on her body. Meanwhile, along with Ferenz's death, the sound of another system notification entered Shifeng's ears. "System, congratulations. You have liberated Kalisha from the curse plaguing her. Rewarding 5 levels and 20 free legacy skill points. Immediately, Shifeng's level went from 125 to 130. After reaching Tier 4, he would receive 2 legacy skill points for every 3 levels he gained. After including the leftover legacy skill points he had when he was at Tier 3, he now had a total of 221 legacy skill points. If he wanted to, he could spend 200 legacy skill points to learn a Tier 4 Apex legacy skill. However, before Shifeng could decide which Apex legacy skill he would learn, Kalisha suddenly turned her gaze toward him. Heavens blessed, thanks to your help, I was able to get rid of the curse cast on me by the evil gods and demon gods. I will now be leaving this small world and heading to a different place to reclaim my lost power, Kalisha said with a tired expression. However, despite her fatigued look, her eyes were full of life. I have seen your fate. So, as gratitude for your help, I can offer you 2 choices. The first choice is to remain in this small world. This temple holds my ancient dragon legacy. Even if you cannot use it, you can give it to someone else, and whoever you give it to will achieve greatness rivaling the ancient gods. The second choice is to leave this small world and head to the greater world to help me collect 300 god crystals within 3 months. As compensation, I will give you the primal or vein that this island has birthed. I will also send you to a place where one of the 7 luminaries' codex's fragments reside. This temple does not have much power left, so you will only have 5 minutes to consider. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,